Shadow Corner fam? It's your friendly neighborhood life coach. Sorry about that. My lovely band has a mind of its own today, but it's not going to stop our shine. So today is Thursday, kind of rainy down here in the South, but as always, we're prepping for the fall early. So hopefully it'll give some good sunshine later on today. So I know that this week we've been talking about how your mind and your body are supposed to connect, how they're the co-creators of your everyday life. But I want to go a little bit left and talk about one of the things that run our lovely, well, it doesn't run our lives, but it is something that we see in movies and something that we see in our everyday life, subtle but non-subtle. I want to talk about sex. This by far is one of those topics where it's not comfortable for some, but it is comfortable for others. I want to explore this section because I really think that it's something that you need to be televised. So reason being is because when I started out in my relationship, the number one thing that when I was in a domestic violence relationship, the one thing that I could not do was the physical touch of my partner. So that made it hard for me to actually be able to communicate with him, to be able to express myself to him. And probably in most cases, you can imagine where my mind went anytime we did the deed. So I figured that this is something in the shadows that needs to be brought to light itself as well. So in this episode and another episode coming later on, I want to talk about sex traumas. I want to talk about things that mentally we don't talk about that would be considered taboo or anything else. And I think this is one of those things that, for me personally, is very important. So our guest today knows this all too well, and she is a practitioner in helping individuals and couples with their lives in this section. Sorry if it seems like I'm a little nervous. It's only because, like I said, this is one of those things that in Christianity they never really talked about. So it's like awkward and it's not awkward at the same time. So we're gonna go ahead and just go with the description of our guest, and just you'll get the gist. It's gonna be a fun show. So what happens when a former NYC healthcare attorney leaves behind sexless 20-year marriage and steps into a powerful new chapter of sexual healing, embodiment, and purpose? In this insightful and liberating episode on Shadow Corner, we sit down with the best-selling author and sex intimacy educator, Ms. Pailet, to explore what it truly means to live an orgasmic life. Ms. Pailet shares her personal journey from disconnection to desire and how that transformed and ignited her passion, her mission to help others reclaim their pleasure, heal from past traumas, and reawaken their authentic intimacy. So today we're going to be talking about why pleasure is not a luxury, it's a birthright. How trauma and social conditions keep us from disconnecting from our bodies, and also tools to begin reclaiming intimacy with ourselves and our partners. What to do if your relationship is stuck and you don't know how to get out. And then also, she may even give us a preview of the sex and intimacy repair kit. Whether you're single or in a relationship or on the healing journey, this episode offers permission to embrace your full sensual self without shame, guilt, or apology. So again, I apologize for my awkwardness, But ladies and gentlemen, our guest, Miss Pike. Hey, girlie, how you doing?
Hi, Cyan. I'm doing well, thanks. Hi, everybody. Do you want me to say a little bit about who I am?
Yes.
Okay.
Tell people about who you are, what you do, and what got you into this profession.
Okay, perfect. So hi, everyone. My name is Xanet Pailet. And as Cyan said, I'm a former healthcare attorney who lived in an essentially sexless marriage for over 2 decades. I really and I appreciate, Cyan, you saying like the discomfort you have of even like talking about this topic, because it's very challenging for so many people. And that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about being able to talk about this and write books about it and help people, because I'm really trying to help all of us normalize the culture that we have around shame. The culture of shame we have around sexuality in this country, in addition to all of the sexual trauma that so many women have experienced. For me personally, I had a lot of what we call shame trauma. So trauma comes in a lot of different forms. And shame trauma happens really when you get very, very shamed around your sexuality. I see this very intensely in some of the more traditional religious practices, the Mormon practices, for example, right? Like there's a lot of shame trauma around sex. I experienced it a little bit differently. I experienced it as a young child when, little kids, right? Like they're curious about bodies and body parts, and that's normal. But I was caught, I guess, playing doctor, maybe touching each other, possibly. I don't remember it that much. When I was like 7 years old in first grade with my best friend, and her mother caught us. And it was horrifying for me. I got in so much trouble from my mother, but that wasn't the worst part. This is where it really resonated. This is where it really had a huge impact on me. What happened was her family was from London. And at the end of first grade, they moved away. Well, I didn't know why they moved away, but I assumed they moved away because like I was a bad person because we were caught doing this really, really shameful thing. And that had such a huge impact on me. And I carried that shame like for many, many, many years. And I had some other experiences around shame. Probably some of you all can maybe relate to this. When I was like 10 or 12 and I was walking to school, and my mother didn't give me a training bra, but I had breasts at that time. And I was catcalled by some guys in a like gardening. They were probably gardeners or something like that. They were in the back of like a truck, and they catcalled me while I was walking to school. And that was terrifying for me. I was like 10, 11 years old, walking to middle school, and it was terrifying for me. So that began my pathway of really disconnecting from my body and feeling all of the shame around anything having to do with my genitals, my breasts. Like it didn't matter. That is actually where that process began. And I took that all the way, as we do, right? I took that all the way into my intimate relationships. So, the very first time when I had sex and I was all of 16 years old, it didn't feel very good, which often it doesn't. But it never felt good. It never felt good. Sex was always painful for me, probably because now I can say this. I know I wasn't sufficiently aroused. I wasn't sufficiently relaxed. I was carrying all of this trauma in my body. And I brought that into a marriage when I was 24 years old, when I got married. And I brought that into that marriage as well. And so, ultimately, sex was so traumatic for me and so uncomfortable. And there were so many tears and so many fights, with my husband, that after our second child was born, I was just like, I'm done. And I was 28 years old. And basically kind of closed up shop. We might have had sex, a handful of times. But, not after I was 34 years old. I was really, really, truly done. And that, it had a lot of negative consequences in my life, as it does whenever you're in a long-term relationship and the intimacy falls away. It also starts to affect the relationship itself as well. We weren't able to talk about this. We never brought it up. It became like the hidden thing that was shoved under the carpet, right? But we were both, I think, pretty miserable at times with respect to the intimate part of our relationship. So that was a little bit of my story. When I turned 50, I left that marriage. We were both very happy to leave the marriage at that time. And I just had to take a hard look at myself and ask myself, so here you are, you're 50 years old, your kids are now in college. What are you going to do with the rest of your life? Like, do you want to ever look at this issue for yourself? Right. Like, I'm like, I want to have a boyfriend. Like, I want to be in a relationship. I just don't want to have sex. And I just knew that wasn't going to fly in New York City. And, in whenever that was, 2010,
right.
Like, I wasn't going to find that person or persons, man or woman. Right. So, it made me really start to take a hard look at what was going on and doing the work around my own sexual wounding and my own disconnection with my body and my sexuality, which eventually led me to leave New York, leave being a healthcare lawyer. I was actually running some healthcare not-for-profit organizations, had my own consulting firm as part of that, and just, take a big risk, move to California, where there is a very sex positive area that I was living in, all of the sexuality training programs, the teachers. I was involved in Tantra and sacred sexuality. That was all in California. So it seemed like the right place to go and start my life over again. And that's basically what I did.
Okay. How did your healing journey reshaped your understanding of pleasure and intimacy? Because I know, like I said, for me, it was awkward. Just like my coworkers, they could sit here and they could talk about their sex life all open and everything, and I'm just sitting here like, I'm good. I'm straight. I think that this is red tape for me. We don't talk about that type of stuff. And that's just how we were raised, because we were raised privately, because they was what's in the street does not have to be your stuff.
Right.
So it's just you had to rethink what that meant. And then also the condemning of you have to be married in order to have sex. Right. That was something that I had to deal with.
Yeah.
So it took a while for me to actually get to a point where I'm like, you know what? I actually like sex and I want some today. So
yeah.
How did it reshape you in your pleasure and your intimacy?
Such a great question. So I think what you're referring to, what you're talking about, are what I call our sexual blueprint. And our sexual blueprint are the messages that we receive around sex growing up, right? So messages that you received. I didn't receive any messages, period. My dad died when I was just turning 3 years old. My mom was 43 at the time and never remarried and never dated. She mourned my father until she died at 94. Literally, right? So I received no messages around sex. I had no modeling of what even an intimate male-female relationship should look like, let alone what a sexual relationship should look like. She just wouldn't talk about it, period, at all. But you got different messages. You got, messages. You probably got more of the purity. I call it the purity culture messages, right? You can't have sex before marriage. If you do, you're going to be a slut, right? I don't know if that's the message you got, but a lot of people.
I didn't get the slut one. I did get that the children out of wedlock speech.
Oh, right.
And it wasn't like from my parents. It was from like a member of the church.
Well, there you
And
go.
she was like, God's not going to honor that. And you need to be weary, because she's like, you can't let everybody enter your temple and all that stuff. I was just looking at her like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm 16.
Right.
I'm just now figuring out I have boobs. So, and boob sweat is real. So, I don't know what you mean. And then like I get introduced to guys and I'm like, oh, so that's what you mean.
Got
It.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Right. So those are the type of messages, whether you get them from parents, you get them from the church, you get them from, just your social circles, right? Those messages resonate very, very deeply with us. And they go with us. They become the imprint, if you will, for what our relationship is with intimacy and what our relationship is with sex. And for me, I had no messages, but I had so much shame around it and so much disconnection that, the messages, I guess what I was feeling was like, I was just a broken woman. Like there was something wrong with me. My girlfriends were having sex and having orgasms, and I had never had one. I had never had any pleasure. So like, what is wrong with me? So the rewiring that I had to do was like starting from ground zero, literally, like not only rewiring and really unpacking the ways in which all of the shame I had impacted how I felt about my body, how I felt about female bodies, how I felt about female sexuality, but also how I felt about even allowing myself to experience pleasure. Yeah. Okay. Because we can stop ourselves from that. And it may not be a conscious stopping ourselves, but it can be a traumatic response of stopping ourselves or shutting ourselves down. And so it had a huge impact on me. It was like, and then once I started experiencing more pleasure, I was like a kid in a candy shop at some point, right? I was like, oh my God, there's all of this lusciousness out there, all of this juiciness out there, all of these orgasms that I missed for 30 years, right? Like, or more. I can experience this. I can explore this in different circumstances and with different people. And that may not be the way most people would go about it. It was just my choice, the lifestyle I was in at the time. I wasn't really interested in being in a relationship. I was interested in really exploring my body and exploring pleasure and exploring sexuality, for myself personally, in a different way.
Okay, so why do so many committed couples end up in sexless or passionless phases, even when they love each other deeply? Like, I know that we get to this point where we're like, okay, so we did the marriage thing, we got the job thing, we've have financial security and everything else. Like everything is going well, and then when we get to this part of the story, we're like, it's bleh. So how do we get there? Is it because of the over accomplishments? Is it because like the same person, you're not going to commit to the same person you did when you first got married? Like what is the sauce? Like,
well, thanks for asking. It's a great question. So let me just explain one thing. There is within this country, there's a crisis around sexless marriages. Like if you look at some of the data, it says that most couples, there's about maybe 20 to 25% of couples that are in sexless marriages. But the truth is, it's probably closer to 35 or 40% in long-term relationships. It's a very, very common experience. And everyone defines sexless marriages differently. But generally speaking, the definition I use is that you're having sex less than 10 times a year. I was listening to a podcast the other day by a sex therapist, and she was saying, like, if you have sex at least 6 times a year, more than 6 times a year, you're not in a sexless marriage. And yeah, like once every 2 months, I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. At least the way I define it. So why does this happen? Well, first of all, it happens in long-term relationships because we go through different stages of sex. There are essentially 3 stages of sex. The first one that everybody is familiar with, that they want more and more, they want it to go back to this, is you can either call it friction sex stage, or I like to call it the new relationship energy stage. So when you first meet somebody, right, and you fall in love, the brain and the hormones that your brain produces gets very invested in this relationship. Yeah. And we end up, there's a lot of dopamine flowing into our bodies because this is Mother Nature's way of making sure procreation happens. But it only works in the first 6 to 18 months. That's why when you first meet somebody, like, you're super attracted to them, you're horny all the time, you want to have sex all the time, like, right? We all remember that stage. But it's not supposed to last forever. And I think this is one of the myths that people have, is that this new relationship energy, like, I want to have sex with you every minute of the day, is supposed to last forever. But it doesn't last forever. It is brought on by a dopamine rush. It's like crack cocaine, essentially. Yeah. Then in a long-term relationship, you move into what we call the validation stage of sex. Typically, this is what happens. And in the validation stage of sex, you can be here, and this is what I see a lot. Most couples stay in this stage for their entire relationship. In the validation stage of sex, you have sex for your partner in order to validate the relationship. I'm having sex with him just to make sure that, he's not going to leave, right?
Right.
I'm having sex because I just need to prove to him or her that they still love me, right? So we're using sex as a validation of the closeness of the relationship. This is where, and by the way, you often will know if you're having validation sex, if what couples will say to me is like, yeah, well, if we both have a couple of glasses of wine, or we both, high, or have had some gummies, like, sex is great. Right? But we can only have good sex when we're not sober. That's a great signal that you're in this validation stage of sex. Because you can't actually be super conscious and present with your partner and vulnerable the way you need to be in order to get into the next stage of sex. But what also happens in this validation sex, this is where obligation sex shows up. Oh, I've got to pleasure my partner. Usually this is women, right? Also a messages that we've often received is like, oh, it's all about the man's pleasure. So I've got to make sure my man is happy. Yeah. And we end up having sex. I call it service sex. We're not doing it for service sex. We're not doing it for our pleasure. We're not doing it for our desire. We're doing it to take care of them. Yeah.
Right.
Does this resonate with people? It probably does.
No, it does. It makes a lot of sense, because I know that I ran into like old friends that were like, I was like, he's talking to this other girl, so it's like, maybe I'm not giving him enough, or maybe I need to spice it up a bit. I'm like, no, I mean, if he wants you, then he's gonna want you. But if he's not, not to say like, if he's not committed to strictly you, then it means you're doing something wrong. It's just the fact that in some cases, there are some of us that likes to take apples off of different trees. I explained it that way. I was like, they like to take apples off of different trees. Some people like Fuji apples. Some people like the Golden Delicious. And if they lean more to the Golden Delicious, then that's the type that they want. Not necessarily mean it has to be that all the time. It's just that's where they is, and they're not ready to commit to that, because you don't know like what's going on in that person's head.
Right. Absolutely.
You don't have to just have sex with this one person. Not saying that you have to walk around having sex with everybody, but just understand that your mind and everything else, it relates to your body. And then when they're not connected, nothing flows properly.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. So that's what happens in long-term relationships, right? So that's part of it. We're in different phases. And then also what happens is, so usually when couples aren't having sex, even though they love each other and they come in and they say they love each other, we're best friends. We sleep in the same bed together, we cuddle. But generally, when I dig deeper, and I'm pretty good at doing this, what you notice is that there's actually some underlying relationship issues. So very often, having problems in the bedroom is actually a symptom of the fact that there are relationship issues underneath it that are making you feel like, I don't like this dude right now. I don't want to open up my legs for him. Like, this isn't going to work, right? Because there's resentment that's built up from so many different possibilities. There are conflicts that you've had, because every couple has conflicts, right?
Okay, so what is some of the most common barriers you see that keep couples from reconnecting sexually and emotionally? Like, what is like your top 5 that you've seen in your line of business?
Well, I mean, I think that's what I'm trying to say. So, like, there's honestly, chores around the house is a huge issue for couples, feeling like it's not fair. Usually it's like the women having all of this resentment that not only am I working, but I'm taking care of the kids and I have to make sure the groceries are in, and and I've got to take care of your emotional needs as well, right? So that's a very common conflict that I see in relationships. There's resentments of a partner traveling a lot. Oh, you get to go out and you get to go to all of these great hotels and yada yada, and I have to stay home and do all of the stuff, right? So there's just there's so many different ways in which resentment can be built up. There are often other familial issues. Marriages these days are complicated. A lot of people are having second marriages and third marriages, and there are children and stepchildren involved and exes involved, right? And in-laws involved that cause problems in the long-term relationship, where sometimes they try to get in between the couple. So I think, that's also another area where couples really often will struggle. And all of these types of issues, stress is a huge one. Anybody who's under stress, right? And we're all under stress these days, really, to be honest, right? Economic stress, work stress, whatever, family stress. That's another piece that really disconnects couples from each other, especially because they're not talking about it. They're not communicating about it. They're just getting in fights with each other and yelling and just, building the temperature up and up and up. And that doesn't solve anything for anyone. It just makes them feel less close and less connected, and they don't want to have sex.
Okay, so I understand that too, because I have experienced that one way or another, because I'd be so annoyed, and then he'll come up to me and say, "Hey, baby, can I get some sugar?" I was like, "Oh no, I have to wash these dishes that you left in the sink. I have to do this." So I was like, "You just gonna have to put your panties in water for a second while I finish." And he's like, "Really? I'm trying to get close to you." I was like, "Yeah, and I'm trying to get this house clean because I can't stand it." So it's like, does that mean that you have like a secondary brain when it comes to things too? Because I'm trying to figure this part out.
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I think women and men look at intimacy in very different ways, right? So for most women, in order to want to have sex with our partner, want to, because we want the connection. We've got to feel safe. We have to feel emotionally safe. B, we have to feel like we're ready. And we're in a space where we actually feel like we can be our authentic selves and vulnerable. And we're also like, women are like multitaskers. So there's a lot of things that get in the way of sex very often. There's a lot of things to do. I've got to get the dishes done. I've got to get the kids done. I've got to get the laundry done. I've got to answer these emails for my office, right? And sex ends up becoming on the bottom rung. But again, like, your partner wanted to be close to you, which is sweet, right? And you were kind of maybe feeling, I don't know, a little like annoyed, right? A little resentful, a little bit like maybe underappreciated that I'm the one that has to get the dishes done. I don't know. I'm just like hypothesizing here, Cyan. Am I on track here?
You are. I'm like, sir, you not realizing I just cooked a whole steak dinner for you, and yet I understand you want to reward me now, but the house looks like a mess.
Right.
I would prefer for us to clean first and then do. But it's like some people will be like, "Bomb the dishes, let's go get it on," and I'm like, no, I can't. Because like soon as that high is over, I'm gonna look at like, crap, I still got dishes.
Right, exactly. And some people like I'm like it. Like I can't go to bed with the dishes in the sink. It just drives me crazy. I cannot wake up in the morning and have dirty dishes in my sink. My partner, he put the dishes in the sink, but he doesn't necessarily put them in the dishwasher, right? And I'm just like, I can't do that. Like I gotta wake up in the morning and my sink is clean and I can start my day, right? Yeah, so that's just a part, that's a little bit of, we all have our, little things, little habits that we have, little things that we need to do. But there's just a miscommunication. There was a miss there, right? If we were to like take that apart, you wanted to connect with him too, but you weren't ready. Maybe he came on too strong initially. Maybe you needed to have a little bit of a conversation about, hey, babe, like, I want to be with you too, but could you give me a hand here so that, I'm feeling that I'm not the only one who's taking care of, because, we're always looking for in these little conflicts. And that was like not even really a conflict, right? But these little things that happen, like, what's the feelings underneath that's actually really happening? That's what holds us back. That's what causes conflict in a relationship. Understanding the conversation under the conversation. So what were the real feelings that you were having when this was happening? And can you express that to him? Hey, I'm feeling, when you said that, like, made me feel a little bit, like underappreciated, like you're taking me for granted. I know you're not, but that's how it made me feel. Can you get that? Right? Can you be with me there?
Right.
And getting your partner to like be like, oh yeah, I totally see that. Yeah. That changes the dynamic as well. And maybe you would put down the dishes for a moment.
Right. Okay, so I know that we talked about all the things that could go wrong here. So let's talk about the darker side of this. What does trauma, whether it's from the past experience or relationships, wounds, impact your current intimacy? Because I know that you talked about earlier how with you it was on shame. So what about for the people that guilt, shame, maybe even feel wrong if they did have sex early? Like I said, I had like you're not supposed to have sex until like you're about to have kids or when you get married type stuff. So how does this impact your intimacy in general?
Yeah, great question. So there's all sorts of different types of trauma that impact sexuality and intimacy, right? Obviously, sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, shame trauma, as we talked about, medical trauma, which is another piece for me that I experienced around all of this as well. And as you know, and as you all know, like one in 4 women have experienced non-consensual touch, some sort of trauma, some sort of abuse growing up or as young women or even older, right? And it has a huge effect on us, especially if you've had a lot of trauma at an early age, child sexual abuse, child physical abuse, emotional abuse has a huge impact on the way we function as adults, on our health, on diseases that we have. And it also helps form the imprint for sexuality and intimacy. And that can show up in a lot of different ways. So very often people have experienced a lot of trauma, feel very uncomfortable and unsafe in their bodies,
Okay.
Makes sense, right?
It does.
Maybe you grew up in an environment, or you had an experience where you thought you could trust this person. They were your coach or whoever they were, right? Or your father. And, you know, they betrayed that trust in a huge, huge way. So you don't feel safe in your body. It's very hard to be in your body, to experience pleasure, to be present, to be grounded, right? So that shows up very, very frequently. Another way in which it shows up is you end up actually dissociating. So dissociation means you essentially leave your body. You're in it for a period of time. You have an out of body experience. So you'll see this a lot if a man says to me, yeah, my wife is like a dead fish when we have sex, literally like a dead fish. And I talk to the woman and I'm like, well, what's going on? Like, are you aware of what's happening? And they might say, well, you know, kind of, but I feel frozen, or sometimes like I'm just like looking down on the scene, not actually in my body having that experience. You can also be certain parts of your body that have been abused can also like lose all sensation. So you could lose sensation in your vulva, you could lose sensation in your breasts. Despite what's happening, despite that the nerve endings are there, the body just shuts down because it has this very, it remembers the experience that you had, and the body speaks. The body is protecting you. They're like, nope, I'm not going to allow that to happen anymore. We get frozen. You know, there's fight, flight, and freeze. And when we're in a traumatic experience, very often, especially around abuse, it's not usually fight and it's not usually flight. We go into a freeze state, which is a very protective state so that we don't get further injured, which also is a reason why a lot of people who experience, especially sexual trauma, don't remember that trauma. They basically have blanked out on it, again, as a protective mechanism. And sometimes it comes roaring back at, you know, the most inopportune times, like when you're with this person you love more than anybody in the world and you trust them more than anybody in the world, and all of a sudden you have a PTSD experience, or your body just totally freezes. So that's another way in which trauma shows up. It creates not a lot of, not feeling safe in your body, therefore touch doesn't feel safe with a partner. And, certain activities. So if you were forced to give somebody oral sex, which is a lot of ways in which the abuse happens, some women just like, they can't do it. Like when they think about seeing a penis, they want to just disappear, literally, because their body is having that traumatic response, even though it's not the perpetrator's penis. That's another way in which it shows up. It has a huge impact on sexuality and intimacy and trust. If you grew up with a mother if you grew up in a divorced family, which so many people have, or as a single mother who had multiple boyfriends, and you saw a lot of ways in which that person abused them, emotionally abused them, made life difficult for them, then as a woman, it's going to be harder for you to find a man that you're going to actually trust, or even to be able to allow yourself to trust that pattern isn't going to repeat.
Okay, so how important is individual healing and self-love and improving a couple's intimacy as well as the person? Because I know I ran into a young lady like early in those guys over her. So she had to be very careful on the people the guys that she talked to, or the men that she even laid with, because only time the trauma that she had was that she didn't want to end up like her mom, choosing the guys over her own children. When she had her own, right, she always made sure she told the guy, look, I understand that you're here for me and everything else, but me and my child is a package deal. If you cannot accept that, then that's what it is. And she didn't go into like the trauma factor until probably later on in the relationship. And as far as I know, if that was something that she didn't like about, like, when it came down to her mother's side of things. And I'm thinking, like, so the sex factor doesn't always have to affect you directly. It can be indirectly when it comes to like a parent or such. Even if you're not the person that's within the act, you are the person that's affected.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that's definitely part of the blueprint, and a lot of people experience trauma in that way as well. So the question about individual healing, you're in a relationship and how important that is. So I have, there's a couple of things around that. First of all, I think individual healing is really important. Like I needed to do my own individual healing. Now I had a community that helped support me. I had a lot of teachers that helped support me, but there's absolutely no way in the context of a relationship that I could have done some of that healing. I just don't think I could have. I don't think anybody would have wanted to be around to see me go through that. But I also don't necessarily, so I see couples where one of them has had a lot of trauma, and the only way to really work with them is to help that person work through the trauma first, or at least do a little bit of work around that trauma if they've not done anything, because otherwise you're just hitting up against the trauma, you're hitting up against the trauma, you're hitting up against the trauma, and you're not going to make a ton of progress. So I think it depends on what we're talking about. If we're talking about healing our childhood wounds, our self-worth wounds, right, our wounds around being codependent, like all of those type of pieces, then I think that the best place to do that work is in the context of a relationship, 100%. But I think when we're talking about healing our trauma, that's very hard to do in the context of, you can do it in a relationship if you're working with that individual person on their own healing and their own trauma. What I don't buy into, because I hear this a lot in the personal development growth world, and I'm not a proponent of this. What I don't buy into is when people say, I've got to do my own work before I can be in a relationship. And my answer to that, I hear that a lot, right? My answer to that is, yeah, you should do some of your own work, but the most healing that you can do of your wounds actually happens in the context of a relationship, because most of our wounds go back to attachment wounds, feeling anxiously attached, right? Feeling like we're avoidantly attached, which holds us back from being able to be intimate. And the only place to really work on creating the secure attachment that we're all looking for is in the context of a relationship. So I don't buy into that, like, I've got to do my own work I've got to do 10 years of my own work first before I can be in a relationship. I can
probably talk on that.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so as a coach, and from a coach perspective, the reason why it's being said in that manner, and I was like, you can misquote me or not, I'm not saying it wrong. That is all on you, all on how you feel about it. The only reason why I said it is because not everybody carries the same suitcase of coping mechanisms that you do. So it's like when you're going through a relationship, you have to make sure that at least the most heaviest things you've already dealt with, because not everybody is emotionally secure enough to be able to help you with that. That's why that's in some cases secure when it comes down to helping you with these things, because they probably have never experienced. They probably had a healthy family life. Their mother and father were married and they had sex. They had bunches of children. They didn't have any problems. They always were stern, disciplined, and all this other stuff, compared to somebody that's dealt with like the trauma I told you earlier about the young lady. Her mother was not married. So majority of the time she saw her mother with different men. She didn't see it in a committed relationship, and she had multiple different fathers for each sibling. So it's like when you go into a relationship with someone, I always tell you, I was like, when you're in a relationship with someone, you're an individual first before you're that person's partner. So that means that even though you two are walking the road together, you also have your own individual path that you have to blaze. But it just so happens now you have someone to go with you.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that at all. I think that's absolutely true. And some people feel better doing their work before they go into a relationship.
Right.
I mean, and for some people, like, I was in multiple relationships before I landed with my lifetime partner. But, every relationship was a learning experience through my healing journey, right? Like, I learned something new. I healed something new. Healthy about that as well, right? Because then you get to see all of these pieces, and eventually you get to the point where you're like, okay, I can see there's a red flag here. Maybe 2 years ago it would have taken me 8 months to see it. Now I can see it in the first month. Right.
So it gets down to the point where it's like the partner that you choose, are they willing to go through that with you or go through that process with you? Right. And it's like, and it's not because, like, again, some people will feel like they have been bamboozled if you take them through this roller coaster ride and they had nowhere to expect it. That just means like you wasn't completely honest.
Right.
So then you get to that point where it's like now you're building trauma within the partner that you chose. And then they have to deconstruct that with another person. And then it becomes a cycle of broke people. I'm not saying that you have to be fully healed, but you do have to get to a point where it's like your major triggers do not overlap with what you've already learned. One incident where it was like a couple where one girl, she was abused for 10 whole years by her abuser. She was jumpy and she'd always feel as if like anytime he moved out the bed, she would automatically jump and pull up her fist because she didn't know if he was going to fight her that day or he was going to fight her the next day. Now she's in a healthy relationship, but in the beginning of the relationship, that same jumpiness still came with her, and her boyfriend at the time was like, "Why are you so jumpy?" And he realized where that jumpiness came from. So it was like, you have to get over that threshold first. And then like we would talk about it. And she was like, but I don't understand why I can't get over. I was like, because this is something that you've had. This is the catalyst of 10 years. You can't expect that to be knocked down in 6 months. No. I mean, you had to deal with somebody that was just as bipolar as a seesaw. 1 minute they over here, 1 minute they over there. Yeah. But I was like, but you're gonna have to also teach that person what are your needs for you to be secure. And
I agree. I totally agree with that. I mean, and very often, like I said, there's dual counseling going on. There's couples coaching and there's individual coaching. And very often, most of my couples are both in therapy, which is great. I'm a huge fan of that. Right. I'm still in therapy, right? Like hell, I cried to my therapist this morning about something. That's that changing and transformation, that personal growth never ends. But I definitely hear what you're saying. But I want to tell you why I think sometimes this happens, because in the beginning of a relationship, when the new relationship energy is going and the dopamine is so strong, it overrides the trauma. So a lot of women or anybody who's been sexually abused and have had issues around sex in a new relationship, they are actually able to have sex fine. Like they don't have the trauma symptoms. Like they're actually in a good place. And then when the new relationship energy ends and the dopamine levels decrease, the trauma comes roaring back because they know that's no longer overriding the amygdala. That's what it was doing. It was overriding the amygdala in the brain, which is the fear center of our sympathetic nervous system. But it was overriding it. And so once that override is down, then all of it starts coming back. So that's very often like they yes, they haven't disclosed anything, but they're also like, well, I must be cured. Everything must be fine, but it's not.
Right. It's just the water under the surface, that's like an iceberg. Right. Just because the top part it looks like it's underneath, it could be miles away long.
Exactly. But yeah, no, I definitely agree with that.
Okay. So can you explain the role of somatic work in body awareness and reclaiming your pleasure? Because I know that we're going to talk about your the sex and intimacy repair kit in just a moment, but can you explain that role if you don't mind, madam?
Yeah, absolutely. So somatics means somatic therapy or somatic sexology means that you're actually working inside of the body. Like we're using our body for signals and for starting to feel feelings and emotions. And, sex and intimacy actually is a very physical experience that people have. When I feel vulnerable with my partner, I feel like my eyes start tearing, my heart starts to open, right? When I get aroused, I have like chill bumps on my body. And so, I think part of the challenges that a lot of us have around, and I think somatic therapy is great for anything, but especially for sexuality and intimacy, because you can't talk your way into better sex. We end up talking, and we see therapists and they talk to us, and it's like, yeah, that's not going to work. You've got to have a felt experience of what that is like in your body. You have to have a felt experience of what intimacy feels like. You have to have a felt experience of like, what does it feel like when I touch you this way? What are you aware of? Everything has to slow down. And, our body holds, same thing. The work I do on trauma is also somatic based. Like our body holds all of our memories, our good memories, our trauma, our happy memories. It's all held in our body. So somatics allows us and encourages us to really experience sexuality and intimacy from a body-based perspective, which is very different. It means that we slow the way down, that we spend time, maybe we just look at our partner and notice the feelings that are coming up, right? That we breathe. Breathing is really important in somatics because the more we breathe, the more we're going to allow ourselves to feel both emotionally and physically. So it's a much more powerful and, in my mind, like the really most effective way to be able to do therapy in general, but definitely to work on, sexuality and intimacy issues to help couples get a felt sense of what it feels like in their body when they actually feel disconnected. What happens to you? Like, what's your shoulders doing? What's your belly doing? And what does it feel like when you actually come into connection? And that's where the healing starts to happen as we start to have more awareness around that piece.
Okay. What advice do you have for couples struggling to communicate their desires and sexual needs?
I think this is a huge issue for couples. There's, again, a lot of shame overriding our ability to communicate. We're afraid of asking for what we want. We may not know what we want. We may be afraid of what our partner's fantasies are. We may be afraid of how they're going to respond to our own fantasies. So one of the recommendations that I have for couples around this is to start slow, and for everybody just to maybe write down on a piece of paper, here are 5 things that I like about sex. You write it down, your partner writes it down. Let's talk about it. Do we both like the same things? Are there things that you like that I don't like? Can we talk about that? Then maybe here are 5 things that could be better. I never say I don't like, but could be better, right? So starting in small bites. I like when couples feel really disconnected and they're doing this on their own. I never do this in my sessions. To write things down. It gives you a little time to process it. There's a little distance. Your partner gets to read the list and also have time to process it as well. So that's a one little quick tool to be able to start the conversation.
Okay. So we're gonna jump right into your new book, The Sex and Intimacy Repair Kit. Sounds like a great resource for anybody that is in that.
Well, it will be once it's published.
Right. Once it is published. So, what inspired you to write it, and what can readers expect to gain from
Thank you. So my first book, Living an Orgasmic Life, was really about my own personal journey, and it was written from the perspective and basically for women to help them heal their sexual blocks, some of their trauma, and that was very much related to my journey then.
Okay.
This book is really a way for me to gather all of the great work that I've been doing with couples over the last 7 years. I've been coaching for 15 years, but I've really been working with couples more intensively last 7 years, and really just put it in a book. Like, these are the steps to be able to repair issues around your sex life and your intimacy life. And it really has just tons and tons of practices in a very sort of, I go through it first from the perspective of healing the emotional components. And I mean, it goes really deep. It's kind of the stuff I geek out on, like the childhood wounds that we have, and really talking about that with your partner and being empathetic and understanding, when you're in a fight, there's not 2 children and there's not 2 adults in the room. There's only 2, traumatized children in the room, right? So it goes very step by step, starting from the emotional level, going to the last part, which is more the sexual level. I also use tons of different examples, and actually, I've done this differently in this book. I actually take people through parts of a session with both partners speaking and me coaching them, so they also can maybe get a better sense of what's actually happening, and it's a little bit more relatable than just like a parable or a little excerpt of a story. So that's what's in store for them when it gets published and when I finish writing it. So, which it'll be written in the next finished. I just have one part left, but it'll be published in supposed to be the spring of 2026. We'll see where my publisher is at that point.
I can't wait. I want to read it right. Yeah. But all right, so I have where can listeners find you online and learn more about you, and what are some tips or pieces of advice for every couple to remember when working on their intimacy?
Okay, so the best way to make contact with me is to go to this website, which is howtoimproveMyLoveLife.com, howtoimproveMyLoveLife.com, where you will receive a free gift, which is 20 minutes to better sex. So it's basically 7 3-minute short little videos of 7 different tips in order to improve your sex life. And then you'll be on my list and you'll hear from me. If you really want to reach out to me directly, you can go to my website, which is Passionate Intimacy Retreats with an S.com, passionateintimacyretreats.com. That was your first question. And then I know Cyan will list all of my socials. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and LinkedIn, and I think that's it. Not on TikTok or whatever that other one was that you said. Never heard of that one before. Rumble.
Yeah.
Right. And then some very specific tips that you can use. Well, the first one I would say is slow that I feel that couples are having around sex. Everything moves too fast. You know, women's arousal very different than men's arousal. Men are like, you know, microwaves. They're, you know, flash and they're ready. Women, right? Women are like cakes that bake in the oven. We need time. We get warmed up from the outside in. So slowing everything down can be very helpful. And then also understanding that our arousal pathways are very different. That's also a second tip that I have for people. Also, like, you know, taking goals and expectations off the table. That's another place where people get like, which puts a lot of performance pressure both on women and men, and that takes us out of the body experience and into our head, which is one of the things that causes a lot of challenges for people as well. And if you want to know the rest of the tips, you got to go check out those videos on how to improve your love life.
Gotcha. Okay, and this is the final question I ask every guest, and it is one that I feel has defined them as a person, as well as defined them then as well as now. If you could say something to your past, present, or future self, does not matter what time period, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, that's a great question, Cyan. The answer for me would be trust your body.
Gotcha. Alrighty, Miss Madam. It is very, very hard to say goodbye because we can talk all day, but I know you're a busy lady and you have things to do. But I am doing, and I'll personally invite you. I'm doing this thing that's going to be the circle. Basically, have those that specialize in the profession, and we all have a round table and answer some questions and from fans and everything else.
Let me know when it is. I'll be there.
Yes. So that is, like I said, it's still in making, but I want to personally invite you to it. And we are so grateful that you graced us with your presence. And again, pronounce your whole name for us so that way we know exactly who left our stage with so much gems today.
Xanet Pailet. Thank you for having me, and thank you all. This is my first live, so I'm a virgin.
Oh, goodness!
My first thing on a podcast, anyway.
Like I said, it is overwhelming sometimes because you're thinking it's like you don't know who you're talking to, but like if you just have to have a conversation, it's not even. It's not bad.
Awesome.
Yeah. So we will talk to you soon.
That's good.
And we will talk. Well, yeah, I already said that. We will talk to you soon. Thank you so much for being a part of our conversation. Bye for now. All right, good people. So I'm not wrapping up anything when it comes to this episode. She's dropped the mic on mostly everything. But the only thing I can say, the important thing is that nobody knows how you're feeling. Nobody knows how you're going to express yourself with your needs unless you communicate. Couples that are having that problem right now, suggestively, you can hire Miss I hate my brain when it freezes. Our lovely coach of the evening, and then she will get you right. Miss Pailet is a great resource. Her second book is not out yet, but we will be waiting on that, and I will most definitely put it in the link of this episode once it is out. But her first book, we're going to sell this out. We're going to buy it, and we're going to send her so much love with it. But in all seriousness, please make sure that you communicate with your partner. Communicate your needs, your wants. Even if it's not a committed partner, it's whoever you're dealing with. This is, for me, a very semi-awkward episode because, like I said, the family I came from was like, we don't really talk about it. Thank you for watching me squirm in this episode, but also helping me get over this type of hump and a topic. But we have another guest later on in a couple of weeks that's going to be talking about the goodness of sex and what all you can get out of it, statistics and everything. We will talk to her. Her name is Miss Diana Mueller. So stay tuned with this episode. Hi to those on Rumble. And as always, guys,